Have you checked the children? Use your little mad sometimes.
Hi, I'm Chucky. Wanna play?
Sometimes that is better.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
Hi everybody, welcome back to the horror show. I'm Marcia Parker.
Jaime and Fuego here, and we want to give a shout out to our longtime supporter and super cool, badass, fright-tastic friend, Sam Glass, who has sent us gifts previously like Phantom of the Paradise soundtrack and continues to support us on Patreon with this new suggestion. Well, it's not new at this particular point, but it's been... Hey, we're catching up, and we thank you for your patience, good sir. We're talking The Ghost Story, and this is another 1981 horror film that myself and Ms. Marcia Parker are going to be discussing today. And this has some heavy hitters behind it. You've got Fred Astaire in this
That's
movie. It was based on a novel by Peter Straub, who also went on to go write Coco, The Talisman with Stephen King. So, I mean, there's a lot of talent both as far as behind the story and as far as, just actors and whatnot. But this, for me, as far as overall impressions, Marcia, this movie felt like two movies in one that had a tough time intermingling because there is some significant time jump stuff that happens. And I don't know, sometimes with the current stand, it sticks out like a sore thumb. And then there's other times where you can mend it well. This is kind of somewhere in the middle because we get an initial introduction of a character who meets a woman, and she has a backstory. We'll get into that with the story, but it's as we kind of peel those layers back, where it just felt a little schmaltzy and just far less like horror. This is more like a gothic drama, in my opinion, than a horror movie.
Yeah.
And it's the kind of big budget, avant-garde sort of gothic filmmaking we got a lot in the late 70s and the early 80s, and it's not really scary. That's one of the biggest things, despite a story that I feel like could have achieved that. So,
Right.
What did you think?
Yeah, it was kind of hard to get through for me. Like, I was interested when I saw, the casting, and I was like, oh, this could be interesting. I've never watched a movie like this before, so with these actors and stuff, so I think this could be interesting to go. And then I'm like, it was I don't know, it was very dated. The beginning was rough, but as you work your way through it, there was some intrigue of what the result was and what's kind of going on. And then once you finally got it, you're like, oh, okay, that kind of makes sense. But it really, it was a ghost story, but not one of the horror. Like, it was more of a thriller mystery.
Yeah.
So it was
Yeah,
I'd
kind of
pass.
somewhat lies beneath vibes, maybe
Yeah,
a
but-
little bit, but
I didn't like that movie either.
yeah. I honestly, I still remember seeing that Zemeckis film in theaters, and I was just very
Disappointed.
thoroughly underwhelmed. But just to get into this, so I don't know the structuring of the novel since I haven't read it, Straub's novel, which a lot of people have praised so much more so than this. I don't know if it does the narrative timeline jumps that we get in this, but the film essentially starts out with we have this, the Chowder Society is what I think they called themselves.
Yep.
So we have a bunch of white collar older white dudes who they get together and they drink whiskey and they share old stories and stuff like that. But then suddenly there is almost without getting too into it, there is a almost rampant suicide, kind of there's jumping off bridges. There's members of their crew,
Of their family.
yeah, of their family as well. That's right, because the other brother at the beginning of the movie. Yes, I forgot about that. Maybe jump in since you watched this more recently than me. Sorry.
Yeah, so I mean, it's a complex story. So you
there's a lot going on.
you have the core friends. It's a Chowder group or whatever. And
are they Maine, if I remember, or they're somewhere in New England?
I don't know.
Whatever. It doesn't matter.
It was hard for me to follow a lot of it. I'm not gonna lie, but no, the basic of it is that you have the core people of this group. They tell ghost stories and they do all these fun things. They've been friends for years, and they all have families and children and so forth. Well, we start off with a very strange incident that occurs where this gentleman goes to this lover and she's dead, and he was like, what the heck, and scares himself out the window, and everybody was calling it a
Now I remember.
suicide.
Yeah.
And the brother came from wherever he was, and he's like apparently a roamer.
Yeah, he had been teaching, but unfortunately he
Lost his
quit
job,
and he
like,
hit the bottle and all
all
this,
this
although
stuff.
from a bad relationship himself, which
Yep.
is where we get into connective stuff as we go on.
Right. So, he shows up. He's like, I don't think it was suicide. It was homicide. All this stuff.
Estranged from his father, too,
Right.
who, is
And-
the...
And he also said that, he had also had sex with the woman that the guy was engaged to. And then it kind of dives into like him telling this story of what happened in his relationship with the girl and how it all circles around. And then the core group, the older gentlemen, who they're all in their late 50s, 60s.
Oh, way older than that. I
Yeah,
would say
70s.
70s. Yeah,
Yeah,
for
they
sure.
were very dodgy.
Mhm.
They're like, obviously hiding something and not telling the full story and trying to gloss over things, even though the people that they love were slowly dying around them. And there was only one guy that was all like, dude, this is related to what happened all those years ago. And they're like, no. And they're all trying to shut him up. And he's having panic attacks and this and that and not being able to sleep and all these nightmares. And everything finally comes to the ahead at the end when they're faced to just deal with what they didn't deal all those years before. And the payoff was literally like, no, okay.
Yeah.
Like, overall, the story, I was like, okay, it was, like I said, it was a thriller, mystery, which I do tend to enjoy, but I think because of the time and the period and just kind of how the production level and acting level of it just didn't hit well with me, and it didn't make me just be like, oh, this is the greatest movie ever. It just wasn't my bag.
Yeah, some of the conveniences of the finale, and also just like, dare I say, the lack of stakes in the actual, the finale itself, where you're like, oh, that person didn't really get the comeuppance you would have necessarily assumed, and so on. I don't know, the scripting, there's 3 different time periods. There is like that day, like the modern time as it was, and then you segue a little bit back to the brother in Florida at the university when he meets this woman who eventually goes and gets involved with his brother, and that's what culminates with the death that's at the beginning of the movie. But then we go all the way back, and we find out in the third act what actually happened with this Chatter Society when they were all kids, and that's where it especially felt in tone like a different movie. I don't know, there was like, I enjoy the jumping and the backstory and the stuff like that at times, but maybe it was more so like a just critique of the scripting or the editing or whatever it may have been, but it was just a little jarring, and it just didn't gel the way that I thought it needed to build tension, because a movie like this
really
needs
no
to build tension. It was just kind of drab in that regard.
It was very flat in the storytelling.
Yeah.
And even just like the setups. I mean, the set designs for like the old house and the way they did that, I thought that was kind of cool. There were some things
It's
thought
back
were
east,
well done.
obviously, and I mean,
Yeah.
like even the old dilapidated home that was formerly occupied by the woman, but those 2 characters, the escaped, like they didn't really feel like they yielded much of a purpose. I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah.
It felt like a hack job, and like it was nothing really connected. Like nothing really landed or felt like it. I don't know. It just didn't. It didn't make sense at the end of the day.
almost like a jigsaw puzzle that
Like it fit.
you're
but
like,
you're
oh, it like kind of
uh,
fit there, and you're like, but it doesn't really fit very well over there because that piece was supposed to be up there, and so on and
Yeah.
so forth. So I mean, it just didn't flow and didn't fit to the regard that I had anticipated. Acting wise, I mean, all of these older, very reputable, esteemed guys that were a part of the Chatter Society, I thought they were all solid enough, and all of their respective significant others as well, trying to figure out what is wrong with their respective husbands, and they're just like, why are you waking up in cold sweat screaming in the middle of the night? What sort of guilt has just beriddled you? Why is it returned? And it obviously returned because of something that happened with that one particular guys' sons. But yeah, the son, I didn't really like his performance very much. The aforementioned escapees from the institution. I did think that there was kind of a haunting beauty to this woman who has charmed so many.
Yeah.
I thought she was probably the standout in this, actually. And I don't know. Aside from her, as I racked my brain, there weren't really, even Fred Astaire. I mean, he's old at this particular point. He still looked great for his age, but it's like, I don't know. None of the Chowder Society, none of the men really in this movie wowed me. It was like these older women who are trying to be the backbones of these guys that are riddled with guilt, or this kind of venomous temptress of sorts. And like the women were the best of the acting lot.
I agree with
in
that.
this, at least for me. And that's not blowing smoke. I mean, that is just it's the epitome of the performance that we had here. We kind of touched on like cinematography and the effects
There just really wasn't a
things
lot.
of that nature.
There wasn't a lot to really dive into here. I mean,
And that's where I say it's less of a horror
production
movie.
value and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, more of like a thriller kind of build up. We do in that third act when we see somebody in a car who has been like
In a car for a
underwater
while.
forever, and there's some transformation stuff where you see the true nature of one character in a couple different instances that is effective. With the
Yeah.
makeup work
No, I
and
thought
just
the
like
makeup
looking
was-
dead and like just sunken under a body of water for a long period of time, but.
I thought that the effects were good, like the production value of the special effects and the makeup. There's special effects, but it was more like makeup and practical effects. Was well done, and of that time, I think it would have left an impression for sure. And even the twists in the storyline, I really feel like it's just this movie is outdated itself. And it's a style of movie that we don't typically watch or can appreciate, I think, to be honest. Like, just the way it was presented to us felt like it could have been in the, more 50s or 60s versus, early 80s.
And yet, with some of the people they cast, I feel like maybe that's what they were deliberately going
Yeah.
for. This was a theatrical release, and it was one that they spent money on. Like, we've watched a lot of, really low-budget, late 70s, early 80s horror and stuff, and this is not of that accord. This is gothic, more big budget storytelling at this particular point. And dare I say, this is one that I think could be remade, similar to what we were, talking about earlier. So
They would have to do a lot of work on this one, I think. And I haven't read the book, and maybe
That's where
and
I
maybe
wonder about the
maybe
sequencing.
if they
Yeah.
pull some more information from the source material and maybe sculpted it a different way or presented it in a different way, maybe I don't know. It wasn't my bag. Sorry. Sorry.
yeah, sorry, Sam Glass.
Sorry, Sam. I appreciated it for sure, and I love having the opportunity to watch something different that I don't normally watch, and I do think there was potential there, but it just didn't quite make it for me.
Yeah, I didn't hate it, but it was definitely not something I would find myself revisiting necessarily. I found myself after the fact just much more curious about checking out Straub's book and just to see how drastically different it really was. So, Sam, we love you, man. Thank you so very much for the continued support. And if you want to become a patron yourself, you can hit the link below. Also, like, share, and subscribe. All of that love once this eventually migrates over to our main YouTube channel. That is supremely helpful as well. But, yeah, peeps, until next time, Fright fans, I've been Jaime Fuego.
I'm Marsh Parker.
And remember,
Stay scared.